Hello, and welcome to Financial Planning Unlocked.
The contents of this podcast do not constitute a recommendation or advice, and no action should be taken without seeking advice from a financial planner.
Hi guys, welcome to Financial Planning Unlocked with me, Matthew Hall, Investment Director at Rathbones.
And I'm Malvee Vaja, I'm a financial advisor at Rathbones.
In this podcast, we'll discuss the effects of compounding and how this can affect your regular savings over time. Malvee, do you ever dream of winning the lottery?
Matt, everyone does.
Yeah, to be fair, everyone does, and it's still my plan A. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love my current career. But I can't help but deny that if my Euro Millions ticket came in, there'd 100% be a Matthew Hall-sized hole in that plastic wall over there. I mean, my aspirations for it, if I did win, would probably be a life of extensive travel, probably entrepreneurship, some philanthropy, but probably not full-time employment.
Well, you might have to give that a rest because I think you've got better odds of winning an Oscar or an Olympic medal. But personally, I've always liked the dream where you've got that long lost relative and they leave you a big pot in their will. But unfortunately, my parents are both one of 7. Right. I'm one of 4. So not going to get a massive share of that pot. But instead, I just focus on like investing and enjoying what I need for now, or focusing on what I need for now. Still have the odd daydream.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we all do that, don't we? We have a little daydream, but we sort of take more practical control of our finances, don't we? Yeah. And I'd argue that sort of financial security, not necessarily wealth, because those two are slightly different, is more within people's grasp than many people consider. You know, the key to it really is disciplined and consistent saving. You know, 2 qualities that I argue that all of us possess. Yeah. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong. You know, I'm still an advocate for the Friday night curry. Love a Friday night curry, not just putting a ban on them. But when it comes to sort of, you know, your walk to work this morning, did you really need that sort of extra coffee from the coffee shop? Could you have made it at home?
I know what you mean. And I love having my nails done, always did. But I've actually opted to do these myself now and focused on trying to save a little bit more and saving regularly, not touching that pot. So I think I've learned from doing this job that if I do that, making small changes and investing for 10, 20 years, I'm actually going to value that pot of money way more than having my nails done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've done a little bit of maths on this.
I bet you have.
Won't come as a surprise to you, will it? But did you know it's actually possible to get a pot of £1 million through regular saving?
How?
So if you started at the age of 18, and you carried on until the age of 68 when, you know, our retirement age, and you saved £328 exactly or more.
It's a very precise number.
It is a very precise number, yeah. You wouldn't expect anything less from me, would you? No. Then over time, assume that compounds at a rate of 7%, then you'll end up with a pot of over £1 million. So, which I think is quite fantastic. But if I sort of done the maths again to an amount and adjusted it to an amount which is probably a little bit more realistic for, you know, an 18-year-old that's employed, if you take £164 a month and did the same thing to your 68, then you'd still end up with a pot of over £500,000. So, you know, I think that's a substantial sum. Now, granted, you know, most of the people sort of listening to this podcast are probably over the age of 18, but the point will still stand that the sooner you start, the better. And the real sort of magic to all of this is compounding.
Yeah, so compounding is basically the concept of earning a return on your return on your return. And so not only earning a return on your initial investment amount, but the fact that what you earn on interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that right?
Yeah, and no, you're bang on. I mean, it sounds a little bit like Inception, doesn't it? The whole sort of dream within a dream thing. Yeah. But sort of, it's actually quite easy to get your head around. So it works practically like this. Let's just take, for example, that you've got £1,000 and you put it into a savings account at a rate of 10%. Okay. Now, granted, I appreciate there aren't any savings accounts out there at 10%, or unlikely to be. We're given the current market, but let's just use it for illustrative purposes. All right. At the end of year 1, you're going to end up with your £1,000 plus £100 worth of interest. So £1,100. Assume that you roll that into year 2. Then at the end of year 2, you've got your £1,100 plus £110 in interest. So you add that on and you get £1,210 and so on and so on. So it's a snowballing effect, and effectively sort of each year you're earning interest from the year before.
That's awesome. You've got to remember that obviously you're going to get taxed on that a little bit as well.
True.
But I think the concept of compounding is really, really key. And I think there's a really helpful graph that we've got actually. So if you're listening to this podcast, if you follow the link in the description, you'll be able to see that a much better visual demonstration of how compounding works. The key thing to remember actually is that the earlier you start saving and the longer you leave your money to grow, the better the results are going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, if you are listening to this podcast and you're like me, you're a visual person, then absolutely click on the link because it's a really useful graph. But as you quite rightly said, the key is time, isn't it? And it's never too late to start, even if you start with a small, modest amount now.
So there's nothing actually wrong with daydreaming about winning the lottery. I think that's fine. But taking control of your financial circumstances is far more practical approach than actually just relying on luck. So if you do nothing else after this podcast, I'd really recommend people review their existing savings strategy and really think about whether it's actually in line with their own goals. Can they save more? Can they even start investing? And the way I like to think about it is, perhaps thinking about a short-term pot and a long-term pot, because you've got the short-term pot that's for emergencies and it's easily accessible, but you've also got another pot that you can actually invest for the longer term.
Yeah, absolutely. Practical steps you can take now are absolutely starting as soon as possible. Yeah. Even if that's with small sort of modest amounts, the sooner that you start, the better, because that gives compounding the time that it needs to really work its magic.
Yeah, so even if you set aside a small amount each month, starting now makes a significant difference in the longer run. And another really important aspect when you're thinking about all of this is the type of asset or like the investment vehicle that you use, because a traditional savings account, a normal savings account, we all consider as a safe place to store money, which is great, but the interest rate might not be enough to keep up with inflation, and that's really, really key. So you might want to think about like higher yielding options such as stocks, bonds, collectives, real estate even. People often think they need like a big lump sum to start saving, but the truth is that you can start using any of those investment vehicles with as little as £100 or so. The key thing to remember is that there's different levels of risk attached to each one. So it's really essential that people do their research, speak to a financial advisor, and make sure they've got a good balance for their risk tolerance and their financial goals as well. Investing money comes with so many risks, and you could also lose it all. So be very, very careful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd add to that that diversity is key as well. So, making sure that you sort of put your investments across a number of asset classes rather than all your eggs in one basket, as it were. That way, if one of the assets that you're invested in doesn't perform quite how you'd expect it to, then hopefully the other assets will perform as you'd expect them to help sort of smoothen that volatility out. Making sure that you're diversified across a wide range of assets helps to keep the volatility of your portfolio under control as it grows.
Diversity is key.
It is.
Something that I've also found really, really helpful, and I do this in myself, is automation. So what I mean by that is that I've got regular direct debit set up as soon as I get paid, so that it's done automatically. I don't even think about it. I've got little pots for different goals that I have, and if the money's taken out as soon as I get paid, I don't miss the money, and I don't spend it on other things like shoes and makeup, clothes. It's really, really helped me be more consistent about saving and investing without really having to think about it. And I just do it kind of automatically. So as soon as I get paid, I pay myself first and then like prioritize that future side of things as well. And it just makes it easier to stick to the goals as well. And the most rewarding thing, I think, is when you look back at what you've actually managed to save as well, like over a year, 2 years, 5 years. So yeah, it's nice. I think that's a really good way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Pay yourself first. That's a great mantra, isn't it? But also, like you said, checking in every kind of 6 to 12 months and seeing how you're getting on. I'd say the other sort of side of that coin is just constantly reviewing that plan as well. Our lives, they always change, don't they? It's inevitable, and therefore our financial plans are probably going to change as well. So it's just keeping on top of that and making sure that maybe you need to reduce the amounts that you're saving, or possibly you can even afford to increase it. But also sort of keeping an eye on the investments that you've got, making sure they're performing as you'd like them to, or even keeping an eye out for new investment opportunities.
Yeah. So being proactive and embracing the concept of compound returns, you could really build a very strong level of financial security for you and your family.
Absolutely. I mean, let's be honest, the idea of a windfall is never going to go away, is it? That's still my plan A, and I still buy a lottery ticket every week. But we can't ignore plan B, can we? We've got to take these practical steps, consistent steps towards our financial future, and no doubt our future selves will thank us for it.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for listening, and those of you that are watching, that was Financial Planning Unlocked. Keep your eye or ear out for new episodes coming soon.
This podcast has been produced for information purposes only and isn't intended to constitute financial advice. The information contained within this podcast is believed to be reliable and accurate. Rathbones is under no obligation to update or keep current the information contained in this material.